Hello everyone, welcome to the Ordis card review video. First, a quick note before the reveals. I wanted to comment really quickly about two cards I misread or misunderstood in the previous video. The first one is that Common Beans affects both players as long as your opponent happens to be on the same progress space on the Tumult cards as you are, which bumps it up a little bit. And the other one is that Yeti does not give boosts to itself, it gives boosts to the other things you're playing, which also bumps that one up a little bit. But let's get over to Ordis now. The first card we have here is Ben Saiten. If my expedition is behind, draw a card. I've said before that often the better higher cost cards are not attempting to get a 2-0 because sometimes they just can't do that, and doing something else is really good. Unfortunately, this something else is not like crazy good. We're just kind of paying more for an Ouroboros Groupier for no reason, so you're not really getting compensated for the risk that you get 2-0'd when this gets removed. Has no ward, so this is just a D. I think most people look at this and just see a D, so this will be very fun and limited. The rare version, you know, it's still offering some form of card draw, just not enough to compensate you for the risk that you get blown out and just lose an expedition progress on the spot. Break the Ice. It costs 2 less if you control 3 or more characters, and it's a send to reserve. This card is... if I didn't put the rating up before for the previous two, they were both Ds. This one is an A, but it's not like a high A, I think. It costs a rare point, and there's so many new cards in this set asking for your rare point. And with the release of the new set, there's an increase in removal options, and we're going to move more and more to a point where you have a critical mass of removal, and you have to pick which removals you're not going to actually run. So one downside this one has is that it costs your rare point. Another downside this one has is that you sometimes can't play it early in the turn because you haven't played out enough characters to get it to the max efficiency. So if your opponent starts out with a Muna unique that anchors characters every time they play a character, you often want to remove that immediately so that they can't get the anchor triggers. And to deal with that with this card, you'll have to just pay the full price because you can't keep passing priority while you play out more characters. So those are like minor bad things, whereas everything else about this card is really, really good. Spending a rare point for removal is not that painful when Ordis can accomplish so many things at common. For instance, in Waru, you could play like common Ordis Attorney if you just really needed Break the Ice to deal with specific things opponents in the meta were doing. And this is really efficient. It can be good that it exhausts a character you send to reserve that helps set you up to sabotage the thing you sent to reserve, which could be helpful if it's like a really cheap character that Faunus keeps sending into play and using Helping Hand on just repeatedly every time he gets mana. You can kind of break that loop a little bit. So this is an A, but I think it's not like the highest of A's the way Teamwork Training is. Teamwork Training is very similar to this card at common, which makes it kind of more exciting to have in the card pool. Chrysalis, 2/2/2 Defender, and you get an illusion when it leaves, and it has this support ability that exhausts target card in reserve. The support ability is interesting because you're messing with your opponent's reserve without passing without passing priority to the other player to play a card, which means you could disrupt 2 cards in reserve before they get to play a card. Just commenting on that because that didn't really appear in this way in Beyond the Gates. The top part of this card is bad. It has Defender. The thing about Defender is that, like, the entire expedition has Defender now. Like, it doesn't matter if you add a bunch of cards that don't even need the help of the 2/2/2. You just still have Defender. Defender is a really, really debilitating ability. It's such an important ability that there's like a 5 mana spell that sort of gives one expedition Defender to your opponent called Celebration Day, and that's not a laughable cost for that spell. And you don't want to be doing that to yourself if that's the value of that kind of effect. So I'm really low on Defender. There's not anything here to make this an exception. This is a D. There are cards in Ordis that can try to kill this, sacrifice this, so that the Defender goes away and you just get them off. But there's not enough of them. There's not like a deck that would be running enough of them to use this. Dongdeshen. You may exhaust target card in reserve as an arrow ability. This is just very unneeded because you have Legate at 2 and Spy at 3. And I think you don't need a critical mass of disruption. If you did want to try a strategy that had a critical mass of reserve disruption, you'd probably want to remove the cards completely so that your opponent completely runs out of cards. And this is 4, which needs to be pretty impressive and powerful to be worth 4. That's a very high cost in Altered. So we're going to give this a D. Rare Dongdeshen is a 3/3/3 for 3. So that's at least in Waru, we're kind of familiar with paying these kinds of costs for something that says Bureaucrat. We had 4-cost Bureaucrats in Waru, and they just mostly didn't cut the muster. But here at Rare, we're seeing a cost that has made it into decks before. And now it has at noon, you may exhaust target card in reserve. I think this has a utility that seems slightly worse than the utility of Quetzalcoatl, which is a similar card we're already familiar with. I think if you put the soldier token in the right expedition, it averages out to being a little more important than this disruption. But it's really close. It wouldn't be surprising if we were playing Dongdeshen instead of Quetzalcoatl. It could especially matter like what kinds of strategies you're expecting to face, whether Dongdeshen is more impactful than a 1/1/1. And when you play cards that let you play with the sleep mechanic, you can often use your bureaucrats that line up the best against your opponent's strategy extra times. And sometimes that is Quetzalcoatl, like if you're against Fen, you get to use Quetzalcoatl extra times. But in a different world, if reserve cards were really important, it could be that you use your Dongdeshen extra times for a specific opponent that's really weak to this. So I'm going to give this a B, and this is an interesting consideration for Waru decks. I would be surprised if the other 2 heroes are interested at all. Ebenezer Scrooge. 3/3/3 for a bureaucrat. And Beyond the Gates, I think we would probably already play that at common, but with the vastly increased card pool, it might not be enough on its own. But it also has a reserve ability. Target character you control with hand cost 4 or less gains a sleep. In my Muna video, I already went over how powerful I think this reserve ability is. And I don't think anything specific about Muna is making this ability really powerful. So I think Sigismar wants to be playing this card, and Gulrang wants to be playing this card. And then it can just like go without saying, if I'm saying that Waru also wants to play this card. So this is going to be a high A. I think this is really, really good. you are going to be able to pay 0 and keep something in play for the next day in an expedition you're losing anyway. And then on top of that, if you find a spot where it's correct to punt an expedition, you can go for that. That won't come up much, but it could. If you want to set up a council lock against your opponent with 2 councils or something, there's all sorts of crazy use cases, but just the base use case of sending a 2/2/2 or a 3/3/3 to the next turn because that expedition is losing and both players are out of mana, and you can fire this off, that's great. And then this stat line and cost with the bureaucrat type is super great too. So this is a crazy power boost for Waru because this is coming in at common, no deck building cost. The rare Ebenezer Scrooge, it just adds the ability that cards from reserve cost 1 more. I think we're not playing this. This isn't like where you lose the ability to mana zone it because it's a specific card. I do think we're whether we play Ebenezer Scrooge at rare or common, we're playing it most of the times we draw it and trying not to mana zone it most of the times we draw it. But I think we're going to get higher impact from rare point spends elsewhere. This can be pretty powerful against Traced, but I think if we were specifically spending rare points for Axiom decks because messing with the reserve was especially powerful in our meta, we would probably spend the rare point to make Dong Deshen an acceptable cost and then play that, or something similar to that. Make some other matchup specific card that's not playable at common come in as a rare to increase the number of copies we have of it. So in that sense, it's kind of we would rather have a higher quantity of strong cards than make one of our solid cards even stronger. That's a way of putting it. Let's give Scrooge a C. There's definitely enough going on here that it's not some glaring mistake if we spent a rare point on it. And some people might think that this, from day one, we should be jamming 3 of these. So it's kind of a strong statement for me to give this a C, but I'm going to make a strong statement there that I think we should do even more stuff with a rare point. Field reinforcements. If each of your expeditions is behind or tied, you can choose both. Otherwise, you have to choose one, but really, if you can't meet this condition, you're probably using this for mana. Draw a card and make a 1/1/1. I think this would have filled out the bottom common slots if you just added only this card to be on the gates, but we're getting so much new powerful commons in this set that this is just already outclassed by the other stuff in this set. It's all right. It's a new way to draw cards while keeping pace in the game. But I think there's going to be some more creative deck building that we can do to keep our hands pretty full while we're keeping up with our opponent. Even in Waru, where this is really easy to meet the condition of, even then, I think if this was always on all the time, it would just be on the verge of being good enough and be not quite good enough. So I'm going to give this a C, and we'll see how that pans out. The token is a 2/2/2 and Golrang. So since this is sort of maybe the first Golrang card, aside from Betizen, I wanted to mention that the Golrang cards in general, I'm going to rate as if they don't make Golrang good enough, because that's my opinion currently. I think they're not going to make Golrang good enough. So I'm not going to really deeply think through whether Golrang's boost counter makes me play this. I'm still a Sigismar and Waru believer. The rare version lets you play it twice. That's a lot of card draw. One funny thing about Ordis is that you're doing so well on card draw just from Ozma and in Waru from Ordis Attorney. Now, when you look at other card draw cards you want to add to the deck, you're kind of okay with them just drawing you only a little bit, because it's probably going to meet all of your needs for the game in general. So this is probably going to be kind of overkill, where Baba Yaga's going to be better. This one's a D, because I think this is a silly rare point spend here. Fire Rabbit. You may have me gain fleeting. If you do, another target character gains 1 boost. This is pretty interesting because this is Ordis Trooper stats, but you're losing half a card every time you play it. We've seen Foundry Mechanic see play, and Foundry Mechanic has less stats than this. You also lose some control over where these stats are. Sigismar loses less control over where these stats are because he immediately gets a presence in 1 expedition. But if you play in the companion expedition with the Fire Rabbit, then the Fire Rabbit cannot boost itself, so even if you want some of these stats to be over in that expedition, that's not something that's an option for you. I'm going to give the Fire Rabbit a C. It wouldn't be terribly surprising if there was like this some kind of clever deck that just runs a massive amount of 1-drops and resolves any issues with running out of cards that way by picking the right cards to play in the 2, 3, and 4 cost slots. And this might be pretty likely to make the cut in that kind of deck. But for now, I would rather play Foundry Mechanic still. Even though it has slightly lower stats, you have more control over where the stats go, and you get to play it twice. It can be pretty important to be able to play your one cost card twice. It is true that you don't have to gain the fleeting. You can choose not to gain fleeting, but often you're going to need the 1/1/2 stats or 2/2/1 stats to accomplish your goals in Ordis mirrors and such. This is a toughie. See how this one pans out. Geyser. Return target character or permanent to its owner's hand, then put me in your mana orbs as an exhausted mana orb. So in Waru doesn't want to play this at all, I don't think, because you have to end the bureaucrat train to play this. It costs too much mana. In Sigismar, this is pretty interesting because you're probably going to go 1/1 after playing this, given that you have the free token, and then also maybe playing a 1-drop if you play this a little later. But you might rather play a Baba Yaga, or might rather do something else that builds an advantage. But it might be that this is the thing you want to do. This is the most helpful thing. Like maybe if the decks that are the #1 threat are Muna decks that are playing the Spindle and just playing high priority threats and laughing at you when you have to pay a lot of mana to remove them, then using either this on the Spindle or preemptively using it on a character to build up more mana so you can afford the Spindle tax later would be kind of appealing for Sigismar. And then thirdly, we have Ghoulring, which we're generally skeptical of. This is probably the single most helpful card for Ghoulring, because you're sort of drawing a card when you do it, which increases her consistency. She's going to be able to keep more of her cards. And it's probably possible to at least stop your opponent from advancing on one side with this. I would say you'd be unreliable at getting an advancement yourself from it, but you could slow your opponent down enough. But I think we needed like 2 to 3 more of these kinds of cards in the set for Ghoulring to really get there, even though this is like the main one card I see as a boost for her. So we will give this a grade mainly for Sigismar, and we will say that this is a B. It's a pretty appealing angle to go for. Maybe build up a lot of mana to go for an Atlas strategy. But it's not obviously better than other ways of going 1/1 and building a long-term advantage. And it does cost a rare point. Gibbil. If you control 2 or more permanents, create a 2/2/2 robot tokens in target expedition. Otherwise, create only 1. I think we don't have enough permanents to make this exciting. I'm not even sure it's exciting if it's always on. It costs a lot of mana. And if you spend your rare point and you just put out a ton of stats, but it's still like slightly too little stats to get a 2/0, then it's still unimpressive. As we get more cards over time, that supportability becomes more and more exciting, but I don't think there's anything in Ordis that makes it explosive right now. So I'm gonna give this a D. An important note on these is that, like, if your opponent destroys your permanent because your permanent is cool and they want to destroy it, and it turns these off, you create a lot of risk. And you don't really have to create that risk if you're just trying to figure out a way to win 1 expedition for 6 mana. There's so many ways to do that. The hero cards get in the middle here for some reason. Heimdall. You may have target character switch expeditions. So this is generally only going to let you set up 1/1/1s, or 1/1s, because your opponent still has stats somewhere, it's just not here. So this is a D. It's very unlikely that this is going to set up a 2/0, and it obviously doesn't create a permanent advantage. In fact, you're playing a card with a hand ability, so the second time it doesn't do anything cool. Hound. If my expedition is behind, I gain 1 boost. It is surprisingly difficult to guarantee an expedition is behind. I played with that mechanic from this set a little bit already, and I've started like keeping an eye on it. So this will be off a lot of the time. I don't think even Goring wants this. Definitely, I don't think Warrior wants this. And yeah, remember, like, even if one side makes the bonus available, this needs to be playable on both sides for the bonus to be exciting. And if this is playable on both sides, that actually means you are 2 expeditions behind. So you already lost the game, so it's not even a real scenario. So this is very much a D. The rare, however, is a 1 cost, and just 1 costs are very exciting and grab our attention and do lots of things no other cards can do. The condition is still difficult to meet. And we still have, this is similar to Fire Rabbit, where we don't have control over where the stats are going, because we don't get the boost at all unless we pick that 1 expedition we're losing in Waru. This would only be playable in Waru. But we do get to play this 2 times, unlike the Fire Rabbit. I think this is going to be a D. These are interesting things to think about, but it probably doesn't come together. An important thing to remember about cards like this as you come across them in TCGs is that occasionally you do just like blow your opponent out early. You just have good draws and they have bad draws, and then things flip around where you start drawing poorly and your opponent starts drawing better, and these comeback cards can bite you. It's possible to lose from a head. It's possible to lose from parity. So it's not really true that a card that is good when you're behind is always going to help you win, because it helps you out when you need it the most. And I think especially if you play lots of single player video games, they can kind of teach you that effects that are good when you're behind are going to lead to winning. Just because they're structured differently, because you don't have an adversary who also is managing being ahead, being at parity, and being behind. Hypothermia. Each player chooses a character they control. It gains a sleep. This costs 3 from reserve, so it's sort of just fleeting. You get to put something to sleep, and then your opponent puts something to sleep. The main first idea is that maybe we would play this in Waru. Although then your second thought might be that if you play this in Sigismar, you can put a 1/1/1 to sleep, and your opponent probably has to pick something larger to sleep. It says in the italics text, you choose first, which means your opponent can pick something to sleep that counters what you put to sleep. On a lot of board states, that's going to be disadvantageous, where your opponent can pick something that lets them get an advancement they wouldn't have otherwise gotten, and you had to pick something that gave them a counter. This is a D. It's pretty complicated to discuss what this is doing, but the main thing is that this is a symmetrical effect. And there's nothing about Waru or Sigismar that guarantees that you will break the symmetry on this effect. And even if we're not thinking of something that might make it easy to break the symmetry, Sigismar and Waru are two very popular decks. So we're probably going to be against opponents who are playing really similar decks to us sometimes, and then even if there is a way to use blue cards to break the symmetry, those blue cards might be on the other side of the table. So I'm really low on this one. Rare. Each player chooses a character they control. It gains a sleep. We're spending a rare point to make the reserve cost barely playable. This is still a D. Icebound Lake. When a non-token character joins one of your expeditions, if it's behind, I gain a trial counter. In the Muna video, I mentioned how I feel about the Icebounds in general. This one has one of the hardest conditions to meet. This is like one of the most powerful dragons that they have, because it puts something to sleep that can like 2-0 your opponent if you actually do it. But there's like a considerable risk that you just like can't get the trial counters because you're not behind, or because the place you want to play your characters isn't behind. So I'm just going to give this a D. This is the rare Icebound Lake. It costs less. Honestly, didn't really care about the cost. This could possibly not cut it at 0 cost. I'm gonna go that confident on it. I'm gonna give this a D. Jack Frost. You may exhaust target card in reserve. So the thing here would be that legates don't really give us initiative on keeping our opponent from playing their reserve cards. Only the spies do. And Dong de Shen is available at 4, but we said we don't want to pay for an effect like this. This is the correct cost. I think we're not going to be so hard up for that kind of interaction that we're going to have to play this. But it wouldn't be shocking. It wouldn't be shocking. And these are solid stats. We get to use the effect 2 times, so that's cool. So we're going to give this a C. And if the 3 Jack Frost, 3 Spy deck is like one of the best ways to interact with our opponents in Sigismar or in Waru, this is a cheap enough cost to play on the same turn as also playing a Bureaucrat in Waru. Not going to be surprised by it at all. Mobile Armory. Create a 1/1/1 soldier token in my expedition. This is the same stats as common Ordis Trooper, which pretty much no Ordis deck can play because they're playing the rare Ordis Trooper. So it is appealing to add more 1/1/1s to your deck. Paper Herald has seen play to try to up the 1 cost count. And we haven't seen in this set file yet. I think this is the only common 1 cost that is getting added to Ordis, like a 1 cost character. So if we wanted to add a 1/1/1 to our deck this way, that makes sense. Being a gear instead of an actual character means that there's a delay on being able to play it the second time, in the sense that we need to advance this expedition to get it into reserve. That can be a benefit if your reserve is overflowing, or it can be a detriment if your reserve is not overflowing and you would like to use this again sooner. And this is a token instead of a non-token character, so it gains Defender and Golrang, which is either an upside or a downside in Golrang. But we don't really like Golrang. This is a... I think this is a C. I think in both Sigismar and Waru, we're still going to be spending rare points on 1 costs that duke it out with tokens and other 1 costs and win, the Foundry Mechanic and the Ordis Trooper. Because the turn 1, the day 1 and day 2 metagames that are really close to the ground are really important to just barely win expeditions on. Winning against the little token on like the Baba Yaga / token opening and such. So I'm gonna give this a C. I think that's where our 1 cost count should be, is in those rare slots. But this is probably the best 1 cost common, which might be more of a B in terms of, okay, let's say it's a B. If we come up with something that's more powerful to do than Foundry Mechanic, I would be surprised, but we would need 1 cost, and this would probably be what we go to. Let's say a B, but not an A. We're tentatively just planning to keep spamming these rares. Mobile Armory. Defender characters don't prevent my expedition from moving forward. So this is another Golrang support card in the set, and I've seen people be really excited about this. I think this one is very overhyped. The thing is, you can already just play a Haven Warrior in Golrang, and what that Haven Warrior is going to do is have more stats than a card is supposed to have, and allow you to get a 1/1 turn before you're up to 8 mana. And then you're going to be like, cool, I'm happy, I'm relieved to get a 1/1 before I get to 8 mana as Golrang. I'm hoping to be really powerful when I get to 8 mana, and cool. Mobile Armory is letting you do the exact same thing. You are excited to spend a rare point to get a 1/1 before 8 mana, and that's cool. It is an upgrade, because once you're at 8 mana, this is a little better than a Haven Warrior. It's also a little more reliable at getting that 1/1 than something like a Haven Warrior. Or Haven Warrior can be anything. That's just like a random card. Pretty much any rare where the rare point is making it more overstatted. It's like a little better than those cards, because it allows you to play extra tokens into that side and still keep pushing and such. But it's only a little better. Usually your rares are going to cut it. So this is not a huge boost to Golrang. It's a very, very slight boost to Golrang. And aside from Golrang, this text doesn't exist. So because this text doesn't help the 2 heroes that I think you should be playing, I'm going to put it as a D to symbolize my disapproval of Golrang generally, but you probably should include this in all of your Golrang decks. I think it'll be a little more consistent than the other cards you were probably playing before to get those 1 to 7 mana turns. Moth Lantern. When you sacrifice a non-illusion character, create a 2/2/2 illusion in my expedition. Arrow, sacrifice a character. So this gets you like a boost if you sacrifice a token. So it's a 2-cost 1/1/1. And then, yeah, this is like barely functional in Ordis. This has to be in Lindewe, where it's like originally designed for. I'm just gonna give this a D. Like the quick arithmetic of trying to figure out what this card could do, it's not coming up with very much stats at all. This is them filling out the set file, I think, for now. Moth to a Flame. Create a 2/2/2 in each of your expeditions. Cost 4 and then 3. So the second time you have an extra stat you don't deserve, and you have an extra body you don't deserve, but you spent a rare point and you waited for cooldown and you had to play a 4-cost card in your deck the first time, all of those things are like really bad. So we're gonna just give this a D. In terms of getting extra bodies so that like your cards like Charge are more effective, we still have is it called Eager Cadets? Ordis Cadets. We still have the 2-body 2-drop in the format, so you can play that. It costs less cost curve cost, and it costs less rarity cost. Ordis Liaison. Each other character you control gains 1 boost. This is a pretty exciting card in this set. The thing I mainly like about this, I mainly like it for Sigismar. Boru can't play this because 4 is too much mana to spend on non-bureaucrat things. So in Sigismar, what you can do with this card is play it on day 2 on the same side as the token and expect to not get 2-0'd. Well, you have to be going second. So you have to be going second, day 2. Play this with your 1/1/1. And then it doesn't matter if it's on the same side of the token as or not, probably. And then later in the game, you would have this Charge, but you would be up half a card compared to Charge, which is a pretty interesting idea. And it's the same rarity as Charge, it's just costing you a common. It's also possible that getting access to 2 charges at common in the right deck is just like a good thing to be doing. Probably not, but maybe. Rare Ordis Liaison does it. Wait, what's the difference? Oh, Rare Ordis Liaison is like a little bigger, but then you can't do it to both expeditions. So this one's a D. Circling back to this one, I'm going to say that this is a C. I think it doesn't quite see play because all those things I said were interesting, but kind of playing Baba Yaga and then drawing a Charge and having enough cards totaled that way is just probably a better way to deal with losing a half card. And I think finding a way to win the game with only 1 charge per game is probably better than the risks of a 4-cost and the risks of, if you're trying to play this on day 3 and your opponent starts removing some of your characters, then this isn't even a part of the curve on day 3 because it needs those characters to survive to have respectable stats. I think all those like risks and concerns make it probably not the thing to be doing. But it is pretty cool, and I won't be shocked if this is the thing to be doing. Ordis Nightwarden. When I gain a sleep, I gain 1 boost. This is like bonkers. This is an A. This card seems like it was designed for like newbie Waru players who are afraid to sleep their bureaucrats frequently. But like, you sleep your bureaucrats like all the time. So this is just like, this is amazing. This is a free trigger. You just get to play a 2-cost 3/3/3 when Waru would have loved to play just a common 2-mana 2/2/2 bureaucrat to fill out some of the empty slots in the deck, I think, if it was available. So this is an incredible pickup for Waru. Obviously it doesn't do anything for Sigismar. You can use Sandman on it to get even more boosts, or use some of the new cards in the set to sleep it multiple times and gain even more boosts. But we're already at an A, so if we come up with ideas for that make it even better, we aren't going to give it a higher grade on our own grading system here. If I would gain a sleep, I gain Anchored instead. I'm going to give this a D because I was so happy about the common. This is actually a remarkably exciting ability. Like, this is cool, and this is wild. Like, you still get to use Waru's ability because Waru doesn't care that you slept something. It cares that a bureaucrat is there at the start of the day, so you still get the 1/1/1 token. And you can use extra cards in your deck to anchor this multiple times. Like, you can use Sandman to anchor this multiple times, and you can even put the boosts on it. The thing is, you're giving up the common, and I was so excited about the common. And if your opponent is interacting with you, if your opponent is playing removal, you're a little more susceptible to removal than you normally would be, at least if you go for those Sandman lines that really make this like extra impressive. And if you're just getting a 2/2/2 now and a 2/2/2 later, that's pretty on rate for something you spent a rare point on. So I think it's hard to completely go nuts with this. It's a 2/2/2, so it's not explosive in terms of the stat swing when you keeping this in play. And if you put your eggs into the basket, then your opponent can take the eggs back out of the basket. If this was a common, it would be exciting, but this is both a rare and a rare that is making us not play a common we were really excited about. It's really hard to get these 2-cost bureaucrats into your deck at common that let you spend the remaining mana on your turn on other effects your deck needs, while still guaranteeing that you get your free 1/1/1. Or, it's not free, that's the point. Your 1/1/1 every turn as Waru. Ordis Overseer. If my expedition is behind, create an Ordis 1/1/1 soldier token in my expedition. This is once again an A, just because we really like having 2-cost bureaucrats. I guess it's possible that we've never had this many 2-cost bureaucrats before, and once I actually get to play with this many 2-cost bureaucrats, I'll be like, oh, this is becoming too many of them. But I don't think that's likely. I think it's probably likely that you do want just so many of them. I've mentioned concerns about keeping this ability on, so this is definitely weaker than the Night Watch. But it is nice to have this the support ability down here, the Paper Herald support ability. If a 2-cost bureaucrat is not what you need right now, that's a very flexible ability. Bumps the power of this card. And this is like closer to the vanilla stat line than you're usually allowed to play and still get a copy of this ability. Paper Herald is obviously like way small. And you have to use a rare point to access a lot of the other ways of getting this ability. So this support ability is helping the Ordis Overseer be more like the Night Watch in quality. And some of the time you will be behind, and the place you want to play this Overseer will be the expedition you're behind in. when we were talking about the dog, and we were really nervous that the expedition that's behind is not the one that we want the stats in. One thing to note is that like half of that problem is kind of gone because this is a bureaucrat that we can put to sleep with Waru. So although the 111 soldier token might be stats in the expedition we don't really want, the sleeping Ordis overseer is at least sending stats to the next day that might be on the side we want. I don't know. I guess maybe that isn't valid reasoning. I might be reasoning in circles there. Aside from that, this is just... I think if the arrow ability wasn't there at all, I would still give this an A. I'll say that. The rare, if my expedition is behind, create an Ordis recruit 111 soldier token in my expedition for each bureaucrat you control. This one is kind of like charge, except all the stats are only in one expedition, and that's a huge downside. I think if you could put these tokens anywhere you want, this would be a really exciting card and probably a slam dunk. But I think because you are building up, you play a lot of bureaucrats and you play this and you get tons of stats, but since they are all only on one side and you can't even play the overseer on one side and put the tokens on the opposite side. They have to all be where you put the overseer. I think this isn't going to help us set up 2-0s because of that restriction. So I'm going to give this a D, and the power level of the common is going to be a bunch of why we can't really explore whether maybe we can set up 2-0s with it. Like, we're very likely just going to play the common overseer and then try to use charge to do this the way we've always done it. Token. Rallying Call. Target character gains 1 boost. If it is asleep, it loses a sleep. This card is very funny because I think this card is baseline level just like not good at all. There is a boosting card in Muna that I was like a little higher on the boost part of it, but I think Ordis is just so frequently doing stuff similar and better than a boost with low mana amounts that Ordis is not impressed with the boost at all. And I think waking up your own bureaucrats is not something you're going to be excited about as much as you might think you would. It'll win you an expedition now, but it's pretty likely to lose you an expedition the next turn. And you're using a card to make that exchange. You're using a card and a mana to like switch which day you win on instead of like winning more days. So waking up your own characters, I think it'll be extremely narrow and difficult to make that good enough. And you're not going to be able to see the future and not mana zone this card and know a niche situation where that is really good. The thing about this card that is very funny is that it's very, very good against Waru. Because if you both get down to really low mana amounts, and you see the lines drawn on the sand where you see which expedition you're going to lose and which expedition your opponent is going to lose, you can use this card on a really big sleeping bureaucrat that's in the side that they're going to win anyway and wake it up, and now they don't have it next turn. And you did that for 1 mana at common, which is pretty exciting. That's pretty powerful. However, we don't have sideboards in this game, and Waru is not the most popular deck anymore. It's a pretty narrow deck. So this is going to be a D for now, but a D with an asterisk that maybe you play one of these if there's a lot of Warus one day. Rare Rallying Call. If it's asleep, it gains anchored and loses asleep. Interesting. So this is kind of like a physical training. It's similar to physical training in that it's going to give you like approximately 3 stats probably in an expedition, and you need to have already had a certain kind of presence in that expedition. In this case, you need to already have a sleeping character over there. I think this could be a way to 2-0 the next day. You're going to 2-0 the next day because this was asleep. You're going to try to 2-0 the current day with this, I suppose. I think this could be a way to do that, because it's like a stat bomb. It's like, I say 3 like physical training. It may be a little bit more like 4, like kind of frequently. But a lot of our bureaucrats are small, so it might be close to physical training a little too often. I guess on the Night Warden specifically, it's a 4. The second time you play this, it's a lot more predictable, which is interesting. I'm going to give this a C. I think there's even more powerful things we can be doing with our rare points in Ordis. But I like the idea here. I think it's pretty defensible. You can hopefully get both players to spend down enough mana that you get less and less risk of getting blown out for anchoring something. But I'm not sure that the risk of blowouts always goes low enough. There's some rares that can consistently have less risk of exposure to removal compared to this, such as the rare 1-cost cards that we are always talking about. And that's Sigismar, and that's the end of the set. Oh no, that's not the end of the set file. That's the end of the page! Okay. Silent Night. Roll a die, and then 50% chance give anchored, 50% chance give asleep. No. You roll a die, then target a character. So there's a 50% chance that you sleep any character, a 50% chance you anchor any character. This is just like way worse than snoozing, because you have to pay 2 mana. And the only upside compared to snoozing is that you can choose an expedition where you're currently winning. I guess another upside is that you can sleep your opponent's characters, which is good on the last turn, and it's good when you can find specific characters that are not going to come back to bite you on the next day. Overall, I'm pretty unimpressed with this. Also, rolling a die is very unimpressive. If you pay a rare point, you kind of expect good success without rolling a die. My impression of this card is a D. I think this is not what we're going to want. Snoozer Shroom. It's at 302. You may pay 2 to give target character in the expedition facing me asleep. And it has the snooze ability. Target character you control at hand cost 4 less gains of sleep. So we were crazy excited about getting access to this ability without spending a rare point. That really felt like getting away with something. Here we need to actually spend the rare point for it, which is rather fair. I think it's worth a rare point. I'm still really excited about this ability, and we are getting this extra upside here of, if you play this on the last turn of the game, it can be very powerful. You can sleep your opponent's huge character and win the game before it matters that it will wake up. It's a little less flexible than Sandman because you can't target the diagonal expedition, on top of not costing as cheap as Sandman when you pay the 2 bonus. But Sandman does not have that snooze ability. So we're going to give this An A. It is a rare point card, so maybe we'll find that we don't want to spend these rare points. It also has the same stat distribution as Frog Prince, and Frog Prince is a great card that's already in the deck that's the most excited about this, so that has some risk of pushing it out. But this is generally going to be in my first drafts for Wario at least. So we'll see how this one pans out. Something that's funny about this card is that it is pretty similar to a unique I played in my Wario deck in the tournament I played, because it has a reserve ability that you can use when both people have spent all their mana. And that felt like really exciting when I also had the Sandman ability. So this is just a rare point for the Sandman ability and having that, so that's pretty cool. So Nisa, Dedicated Ensign. Defender, but if my expedition is behind, defender characters don't prevent it from moving forward. This card is a D. As mentioned before, you need to be 2 expeditions behind to be able to play cards like this in whichever expedition you'd prefer. And altered cards become close to unplayable if you are not allowed to play them in whichever expedition you'd prefer. And this only has 1 boost counter over like fair market rate for a common. And now it creates a Ordis Recruit 111 soldier token in target expedition. Still a D. The Snow Maiden. A 4-cost card with a little bit more stats than you'd expect is really poor because it's at a cost where it's too inflexible to leverage that into a 2/0. So this is a D. Snow Queen. It's a small eternal character that sort of sabotages your opponent's exhausted cards. This is very, very expensive, and you almost certainly eat a 2/0 the turn you play it, which might just like it likely loses the game the turn you play it. Like, you probably losing that much expedition progress is probably pretty fatal. Like, if you exhaust your opponent's cards and now they can't use them, they've lost maybe like 2 half cards, but they need 2 fewer half cards to win this game because you gave them an entire advancement. A frequent comment, I frequently say, you know, in Altered, advancements and cards can be interchangeable, and this is one of those situations. I'm going to give this a D, and build a deck around perma-sleeping your own Dong Shen if you want this kind of effect. That's way more appealing. Tiny Jail. Send a reserve target character with no statistic over 3. This card is very impressive for us to get in Ordis. It's kind of like Teamwork Training. It sends to reserve, it's fleeting, it costs 2. It can't hit huge things like Teamwork Training, but it can hit some things that Teamwork Training can't hit, in the sense that you can play this as your very first card of the turn when you haven't built up those tokens yet. Like, we know that it's very easy to get enough characters in play to get Teamwork Training to hit anything you want. Ordis decks today are built to have an easy time doing that, but they can't hit anything they want whenever they want. And Tiny Jail might hit the thing you want to hit when you want to hit it. Like the Muna Anchorer unique that was mentioned earlier in the discussion of Break the Ice. If that is one of those uniques that didn't generate with a 4 or higher statistic, you will want something like Tiny Jail to hit it very quickly before it starts getting triggers. And this costs less rare points than Keylon Burst. You also might want to hit a Faunus character before Helping Hand has been applied to it. That's another time when the speed at which you're allowed to play a card might matter. So we're going to give this an A. I think this probably is like a bigger power boost to Break the Ice. There might be universes where we see like 1 common Tiny Jail and 2 Break the Ice in most lists, but I would still feel like getting powerful commons tends to help out more than getting powerful rares, because you could have spent the rares on something else. So I think this is going to be like a bigger deal. Rare Tiny Jail. Send to reserve target character with no statistic over 3. I think we don't need this. If you draw this pretty late in the game, you might never get to play it again. Especially against other Ordis players, you might have to wait for a spot to play a Teamwork Trading or a Tiny Jail and just try to make it break even. Like usually against other Ordis decks, your Teamwork Training isn't amazing, but it breaks even, so it's fine. Or maybe does a little better than break even if you really wait for the right spot. But it's not like a bomb on every single turn of the game like it is against Muna. So I think this cooldown could be like a real concern about getting to use this card. This is also putting your rare point in reserve for multiple turns for your opponent to use something like a Tinkerbell to say, hey, you spent an entire rare point to make sure you get to play this twice this game, but I say you don't get to play it twice this game. So I think this probably isn't what we want to be doing. I mean, you are making your Tinkerbell not able to hit something else. That's not nothing, but let's say a C, because I'm not completely against trying to get 2 removals into the deck, but I think this probably isn't the way you want to go. One thing we noticed about Charge in set 1, I say we, at least me, sometimes I felt like I just wanted to play 2 Charge instead of playing 1 Charge without with the rare point with the loss of bleeding. And even though this doesn't have the cost increase that Rare Charge has, I think I might come to feel the same way about it, where I'd just rather play extra copies of the fleeting common rather than play the rare. It leads to your deck being more consistent because it has higher counts of the effects that you're interested in, and then it may also be a smarter rare point spend. Valimon. Unless you have 8 or more mana orbs, I am Defender. I'll repeat the same thing I said about the what was she called? The Muna 4 mana 5/5/5 that gives your opponent exhausted resupply. Same as that one, slightly overcosted 4 cost. Not possible to leverage it into a 2/0 in most cases. It is possible that the inherent costs of 4 cost characters being inflexible bite you. So even before we read the ability, which is actually a downside ability, we're already at a D for this one. And then this one says, if you have 10 or more mana orbs, I am Gigantic. This is interesting. Goring is looking for ways to just stop losing advancements late in the game. So the way Goring builds might want this, but we are not Goring believers. Sigismar and Waru are just going to win the game before they get to 10 or more mana orbs. And even if Sigismar does adopt the mana ramp card I said that might be on the borderline of being playable for Sigismar, this would just not be playable in the games where you didn't draw one of your 3 copies of it. So this is a D. And even in Gold Ring, I'm not sure if this is what you want to do, because some of the landmark strategies might be more resilient to removal than this. I'm not sure she's going to be able to resolve this thing's issues against removal. Vishvakarma. The next permanent you play this afternoon costs 3 less. If this was a 4-cost 0/0/0, it'd be pretty much the same as a 4-cost 2/2/2 because it's small enough that there's a huge risk of getting 2-0'd. I guess if the permanent you're playing had immediate stats, that would be different, but there's nothing in the Ordis card pool that has immediate stats as a permanent, except the new gear, but that's very, very small. So this is a D, because you can actually get the 4-cost 0/0/0 I compared it to if you really want to. It would just be taking this 4 mana and playing the permanent you wanted. And just do that. That sounds really critical of this card, but this card was clearly designed for Axiom, and it works way better in the base form, so it's just here to fill out the limited set. That is the end. I can't hit the right arrow anymore. I hope you enjoyed this video. I tried to go a little bit faster this time, and I was a little bit successful because I haven't even edited yet. Hopefully I have time to get to the next 4 factions soon. I don't think I'll get to the next 4 factions before the set is out. The set is kind of already considered to be out in some areas. Pre-releases are happening. I'm not sure the difference between a pre-release and the release and the exact street date. But I'll try to get a video for each of the factions before I play them as much as possible, because it's more fun that way. Thank you all for watching, and see you around.